Welcome to SWAYAM online course on Public Financial Administration. In today's module, we will be discussing on the amendments of the Constitution of India. What are the procedures that is followed for the amendment of the laws, of the amendment of the articles of the Constitution? You know that Luther Gulick propagated the principles of administration, which is based on the acronym POSGOB: planning, organizing, staffing, reporting, directing, and of course budgeting. When you take budgeting, it forms an important aspect under the umbrella of public financial administration. And here we see the interconnection between public financial administration and public administration. We know that public administration, according to Woodrow Wilson, as a detailed systematic application of law. It's a government in action, the most obvious part of the government. Any policy needs to have proper planning, proper strategies, proper methods as far as budgeting is concerned. And for a budgeting to be approved, it has to go through proper procedures. There is a set of protocols which the Constitution has laid out for any law to be passed. It is imperative that we as citizens of India should uphold the Constitution at any given point of time. If you take the three organs of the governance, which is the executive, the legislative or the judiciary, should take care and be a watchdog of the Constitution. And also it is meeting the check and balance composition. If the legislature do not follow the laws, then the judiciary can intervene, especially when it goes unconstitutional. And if the executive is not abiding what the legislature is telling, then it again becomes unconstitutional. Any rule that is made by the legislature is coming within the framework of the Constitution of India. So you see that at every given point of time, everything coincides with the Constitution. Any amendments that has to be made as far as the articles is concerned, because of the growing concerns and modifications are required. Of course, it is not as simple as how it is done in the British Parliament or as difficult as how the American Constitution is. The Indian Constitution has also paved way for certain provisions for the amendments to be made. And that is why amendment of the Constitution is very important. If you want to upkeep the public administration objectives of a detailed systematic application of law, it is a government in action and at the same time abiding by the Constitution of India. So the philosophy of governance is based on the constitutional provision that is adequately facilitated and adequately provided for amendments also. As per the growing need, we know that India has become a welfare state. So from a police state, we have moved to a welfare state. So it is essential to have a very good provision as far as the amendment of the Constitution is concerned. Now you see that we are going to cover a few aspects, which is the procedure for the amendments, the type of amendments, and also do some criticism of the amendments. Now to introduce the Constitution, you see that it is a living law of the land. It is very organic as far as the Constitution of India is concerned, because the preamble says that we the people of India constitute ourselves to the Constitution, gives ourselves a Constitution, and also it ends with we hereby adopt, adapt and follow the provisions of the Constitution. So it is imperative that we as citizens of India should follow the provisions and the dynamics and also the guidelines put forth by the Constitution of India. Like any other written constitution, the Constitution of India also has amendment, and it is necessary we need to make certain adjustments as per the requirements of the need. Although if you see the chairperson Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his constituent assembly had laid a wonderful constitution that oversees every minute aspect. If you take the universal suffrage, if you take discrimination, if you take life, right to life, if you take the constitutional remedies, you see that all the provisions are provided to protect the needs, which is inclusive, which is pro-inclusive, and also it admires the needs and facilities required for a younger population also. So, it is very dynamic constitution, and also it forecasts the needs of the future. If you see that Article 368 in Part 20 of the Constitution, it deals with the powers of the Constitution and the powers of the Parliament to amend the Constitution and its procedure. So, Article 368 of Part 20 of the Constitution empowers the Parliament to make amendments as far as the Constitution is concerned. It states the Parliament may, in the exercise of its constituent power, that is, amend by way of addition or variation or repeal, as in the case required of the Constitution, in accordance with the procedures laid down for the purpose. So, Article 368 clearly demarcates the needs and provisions for making amendments in the Constitution. The Parliament cannot amend those provisions which form the basic structure of the Constitution. In the Kesavananda Bharati cases versus Kerala, state of Kerala, it is very obvious that we cannot change the basic structure of the Constitution. We need to uphold the basic structure. It cannot be demantalized. But of course, we can make amendments and changes as per the requirement, and this is enabled by the Article 368. What are the procedures for amendments? The procedure for the amendment of the Constitution as laid down by the Article 368 is as follows. An amendment to the Constitution can be initiated by the introduction of a bill for the purpose in the either house of the Parliament. Either house of the Parliament, the introduction of amendment can be made. Recommendation for amendment can be made either in the Lok Sabha or in the Rajya Sabha. Second point, that the bill can be introduced either by the minister or by a private member and does not require prior permission of the President. So, this comes under ordinary bill. We have already discussed in a module how we need to distinguish between ordinary bill and money bill. So, it is very evident that it can be presented by any member. It could be a member of the opposition or the minister himself. It could be a public bill or a private bill, but this comes under an ordinary bill and it can be recommended for amendment. The bill must be passed in each house by special majority. So, from an ordinary bill, it can be passed as a majority, but as a constitutional amendment bill, it needs a special majority. It cannot be passed just like that. Okay? So, it has to require the permission of the special majority. Majority means it is not a simple majority like 1/10 member is required, or just 25 members from the Rajya Sabha and say 55 members from the Lok Sabha. It needs a special majority. that is a majority of the total membership of the House and a majority of 2/3 of the members of the House present and voting. At least 2/3 members have to be present and voting, and there should be a majority of that. So, it is imperative that it is just not necessary to make an amendment by a simple majority. So, it could happen that every day a majority can happen, because if you have 55 members in the Lok Sabha, it could happen, but it is not possible. You should have at least 2/3 majority present in the House for passing an amendment bill, and then it has to be passed by a special majority. Each House must pass the bill separately. In case of disagreement between the two Houses, there is no provision for holding a joint sitting of the two Houses for the purpose of deliberation and passage of the bill. So, if you see, there is no provision is mentioned. If you see in an ordinary bill, there is a provision for having a joint session as summoned by the President. But in this case, there cannot be a joint session for discussion. It could be done separately, either in the House of the Lok Sabha or either in the House of the Rajya Sabha, and has to be passed as a special majority with 2/3 members present for voting. So, if you see, if the bill seeks to amend the federal positions of the, if you have to seek to amend the federal provisions of the Constitution, it must also be ratified by the legislatures of half of the states or by a simple majority. Then it is also required that a majority of the members of the House present and voting. So, if it is something to do with the federal spirit or the federal nature of the Constitution, then it is coming on behalf of a state, then the state should also be passing by a simple majority by the state legislatures. After duly passed by both the houses of the parliament and ratified by the state legislatures, where necessary, the bill is presented to be the president of for assent. Okay? So, when it is passed by the legislature, passed by both the houses of the parliament, then it goes to the president for the final assent. The president must give his assent to the bill. He can neither withhold his assent to the bill nor return the bill for reconsideration by the parliament. So, it cannot be reconsideration. He can do is by assenting, or he cannot do is by sending it back. He can only give an assent. He can neither withhold his assent to the bill nor return the bill for reconsideration by the parliament. After the president's assent, the bill becomes an act, that is a constitutional amendment act, and the constitution stands amended in accordance with the terms of the act. So, this becomes a constitutional amendment act because it is passed by the state legislatures, it is passed by both the houses of the parliament, and finally the president gives an assent. The president cannot give it for reconsideration or make his changes because it is passed by majority, and majority being seated in the house. So, it is a democratic process. It is a process which is practiced for many ages for amendment, and you see that it is not happening in the will of one single person. It happens by the will and representation of multiple people that becomes the face of the society as far as representation in the houses of the parliament is concerned. What are the types of amendment? Article 368 provides two types of amendments: by special majority of the parliament and also through ratification of half of the state by simple majority. But some other articles provide for the amendments of certain provisions of the Constitution by simple majority of the parliament, that is a majority of the members of each house present and voting. Therefore, the Constitution can be amended in three ways. Amendment can take place by simple majority of the parliament, amendment by a special majority of the parliament, and amendment by special majority of parliament, and also by half of the state legislature. So, the ratification should come from the state legislature also. So, you see there are three types. One is simple majority, then you have the special majority, and then you have the special majority of the parliament inclusive of the ratification of the state legislature. What is a simple majority? A simple majority is a number of provisions in the constitution which can be amended by a simple majority. Of the two houses should be present, two houses members have to be present outside the scope of article 368, and this includes admission of establishment of new states. That can happen by a simple majority, or formation of new states and alteration of areas, boundaries or names of existing states. Like you want Madras to be called Chennai, or now it can be termed as new names in certain places. This can happen from Kolkata, Calcutta to Kolkata, Bombay to Mumbai. So, these changes have happened by a simple majority. Formation of new states and alteration of areas, boundaries or names of existing states. Abolition or creation of legislative councils in the states. That can also be amended by a simple majority. Second schedule emoluments, allowances, privileges and so on of the president, the governors, the speakers. All this can happen by simple majority. And also quorum in the parliament. You know what kind of quorum has to be called for passing a bill. And also in the case of amendments of the constitution. Salaries and allowance of the members of the parliament. Rules of procedures in the parliament. Also privileges of the parliament, its members and its committee. Use of English language in the parliament. Number of judges in the Supreme Court, or appointments of the judges in the Supreme Court. Also conferment of more jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, or use of official language. And now we use bilingual language. So, that is a need of the hour. And so, it is necessary by a simple majority the amendments can be made. What happens in the case of by a special majority in the parliament? The majority of provisions in the constitution needs to be amended by a special majority of the parliament, that is a majority of total membership, total membership of each house, and a majority of 2/3 of the members should be seated in the house, should be present for voting, and then only the voting can be called for amendment of the constitution bill. The expression total membership means the total number of members comprising the house, irrespective of the fact whether there are vacancies or absentees. I want to repeat that line. The expression total membership means the total number of members comprising of the house, irrespective of the fact there are vacancies or absentees. So, you need to know what is the exact number, 550 and 250 in the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha to 550. Strictly speaking, the special majority is required for voting at the third reading stage of the bill, but the way of abundant caution of the requirement for special majority has been provided for in the rules of the houses in respect of all effective stages of the bill. Especially the provisions can be amended in the way of fundamental rights, the directive principles of the state policy. Okay? So, for all these you need a special majority, especially the fundamental rights, the directive principles of the state policy. All the other provisions that are not covered by the first and the third categories. By special majority of parliament and consent of states. This is the third type of amendments. Those provisions of the constitution which are related to the federal structure of the polity can be amended by a special majority of the parliament, also with the consent of the state legislature of that particular state. That can come as a simple majority from the state legislature. If one or some or all the remaining states take no action on the bill, it does not matter. The moment half of the states give their consent, the formality is completed. There is no limit within which state should give their consent to the bill. Okay? It is not necessary that 5 states should give or 2 states, whichever state is giving will be accepted. The following provisions need to be followed for amendment: election of the president and its manner, also the extent of the executive power of the union and the states, Supreme Court and High Court, distribution of legislative powers between the union and the state, goods and services tax, GST, which we are all still arguing because some of the states have accepted, but states like Tamil Nadu also have an issue of the GST because we are not only providing maximum taxes, but also we need to engage ourselves so that we get more taxes as a revenue income, but the share is not good enough for the amount we are paying, because if you see, it is not proportional, it is asymmetric as far as the constitution is concerned. If you see, UP has more representation, Northeast does not have more representation. So, if you ask for the amount of tax being paid, maybe the South region pays more taxes, but the feasibility and the provisions given is not well balanced as far as the proportionality is concerned. And so, any of the list in the 7th schedule will also come under this, and representation of states in the parliament, and also powers of the parliament to amend the constitution and its procedure. So, the power of the parliament is so huge. You see that the Lok Sabha is very powerful, then the Rajya Sabha is also powerful, and the state legislature has the power of making amendments by simple majority. And you see that previously we noticed that the election of the president or the extent or the power relationship between the union and the states, or the rule of the Supreme Court and the High Court, or the distribution of legislative power, or the goods and services taxes, how it is distributed, or anything which comes under the 7th schedule, or anything representation of the state is coming under this exceptional special majority, where a simple majority of the state is enough. So, let us now finally go into the criticism of the amendment procedure. There is no provision for a special body like the Constitutional Convention as far as the USA or the Constitutional Assembly to amend the Constitution. The constituent power is vested in the Parliament and in few cases the state legislature, unless it is inevitable. The power to initiate an amendment to the Constitution lies with the Parliament itself. However, unlike in USA, the state legislature cannot initiate any bill or proposal or for amending the Constitution except in one case, that is, passing a resolution requesting the Parliament for the creation or the abolition of legislative councils in the state. Here also the Parliament can either provide or disprove, can accept or disprove such a resolution as per the requirement as may be necessary. A major part of the Constitution can be amended by the Parliament alone, either by a special majority or by a simple majority. Only in few cases, with the consent of the state legislature, it is required, and at only half of the time, while in USA it is 3/4 of the states. That is why it is very difficult to make an amendment in USA, and it is very easy as far as Britain is concerned. And that is why Britain's Parliament is so powerful, because they had seen the wrath of the monarchy being misused. So, it was imperative to have the Parliament strong. Even if you see, the Japanese diet is very powerful, and the American Constitution, as far as the changes is concerned, although it's one of the oldest democracy like the Britain, it is not empowered to make amendments easily, because it consists or comprises of a confederation of states of 50 states got together. So, it is also valuing the states majority of votes which is required for an amendment to take place. Also, the Constitution does not prescribe the time frame within which the state legislature should ratify or reject an amendment submitted to them. Also, it is silent on the issue of whether the states can withdraw the approval, or after, according to the same, what as per the conditions required, there is a need for approval. After getting the approval, it is also necessary to see that the Constitution has followed the time frame. There is no provision for holding a joint sitting of both the House of Parliament, and it is also made such a way because a joint session of the Parliament can always again be by the face of the nature. If you see that usually the lower house of the Parliament will have the majority from the ruling party, and so the possibility of following what the lower house or the Lok Sabha says is imperative. It's possible. So, significantly they have thought about it. So, they have made that the joint session of the Parliament cannot take place, especially for passing a constitution amendment bill. The process of amendment is similar to that of a legislative process, except for the special majority, and the constitutional amendment bills are to be passed by the Parliament on the same way as ordinary bill. So, we can compare and contrast the ordinary bill to the constitutional amendment bill. We see that it is quite different from the what we say the money bill or the finance bill, where the power is totally vested with the lower house or the Lok Sabha as far as the money bill or the finance bill is concerned. The provisions relating to the amendment procedure are too sketchy and hence leaves a wide scope for taking matters to the judiciary because of its lack or lucidity, or maybe it is vulnerable, I would say. So, as a conclusion, we should say that despite these defects, it cannot be denied that the process that has to be proved to be simple and easy and has succeeded in meeting the changes needed. Despite all that, we have seen 100 amendments. The procedure is not flexible to allow ruling parties to take command. It also engages the opposition party. And it is said that for a democracy to be sustainable, to be strong, it is important to have a strong opposition. If there is a weak opposition, then there is a failing in a democracy. There is a failing of the administration. If the administration is broken, the purpose of the state is lost. Now, we are talking about the concept of nation state and the importance of nation state. It is important to understand that India is not only a nation state, but also very federal in spirit, and also it has given importance to its sovereignty, importance of placing itself in its globe as an identity itself. So, it is also important to hear the voice of the people, the needs of the people. A democratic setup also envisages the social and economic needs of the people. It is also important to understand that there is a political framework which works on the minds of the people. Political awareness is important. Social and economic development is important, and it is only possible if there is growth, if there is development, if there is forecasting the future in a planned way, strategizing way. And in this way, the legislature, the executive and the judiciary is playing a very important role in molding our country, in nation building, in permeating to the lives of the people, for asking the people to perform their duties in the form of participation in whatever work that has been assigned to them. Not only the voting rights, but also to get right people for the right post. And also it is important that we participate in all the bills and engage ourselves in getting right proposals forwarded so that our country is strengthened. As said by K.C. Weir, strikes a good balance between flexibility and rigidity. In this context, Indian Constitution is a mix of flexibility and rigidity. Rigidity is not an answer because that will actually envisage authoritative power. A democratic power should be resilient and also accommodating to the needs of the people and flexible as per the growing needs of the social needs of the people. A welfare policy should be embedded in every program because we see that health, education is an important aspect as far as the growing demands is concerned. With good education, good health prospect, there is good opportunities for livelihood, and also it abides by the Sustainable Development Goals as prescribed by the UN. And it is important that we have strengthening our national economy by having a good financial system, because that will actually strengthen our process of governance. A good governing body will have a good budgeting principles, and also it will have a good financial system, and it will have a good bureaucratic procedure so that it performs its duties, and also the people will also be participating and engaging themselves in good governance. We'll end with what Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had said in the Constituent Assembly. While we want this constitution to be as solid and permanent we can make it, there is no permanence in a constitution. There should be certainty of flexibility. If you make any constitution rigid and permanent, you stop the nation's growth, the growth of a living, vital, organic people. So rightly put that it cannot be rigid, it cannot be permanent. It should be dynamic, a constitution. A constitution should permeate in the lives of the people so that the people can contribute back to the society in the form of fundamental duties in strengthening our nation and making our nation ever powerful. Jai Hind. Thank you.